start with an empty Excel workbook like this, and the first thing we're going to do is to make every second column and every second row a bit tighter. And we do that by selecting the column, moving the mouse to the border between two columns, and then just press down the left bottom of the mouse and drag it to the width we want. In this case, let's take 1.71 and let go. To do this again, I could select the tighter column, copy it with my keyboard, Ctrl C, select where I want to paste it and press Ctrl V. And I have another column with the same width. A third way is to select a column, right click and choose column width. And just write in whatever you want and press enter. And probably the fastest way in this case is to select several columns, and I do this by holding down the Control key on my keyboard. Let's continue here. And then I let go of the keyboard, I right click and choose column width 1.71 and I press enter. And then I do the same thing with the rows. I drag it to 4.50. I can copy this row with my keyboard, Ctrl C, paste it in, Ctrl V, or I can select several, pressing down the Control key on the keyboard, like this. I let go of the Control key and scroll down, press it again. I let go and right click, choose row height 4.50 and press enter. Then we're going to give names to the sheets. I do that by double clicking on the current sheet name, sheet 1, and I just write in the desired name. In this case I write start page and I press enter. Another way to do that is to right click on the sheet name and choose rename. And this sheet we're going to call variables. And I click somewhere in the sheet. And the last sheet will have the name tables, etc. Now we will create the menu bar and the controls. The menu bar is the menu up here, and the controls are these controls here. So when we're done, it's going to look like this, and we're going to be able to change the model type between probabilistic and deterministic model. We're going to be able to change the start age between 40 and 60 years. We will be able to change the time horizon between 5-year, 10-year and lifetime. And finally the study perspective between healthcare payer perspective and societal perspective. The first thing we do is to go to tables, etc. and just write in some background information. I write here model type. It could be probabilistic or deterministic. I make the model type bold. Then we had start age. It could be 40 years or 60 years. Time horizon could be 5 years, 10 years or lifetime. And finally study perspective. Healthcare payer perspective or societal perspective. This is the background information for the controls. This is how a control is created. Go to the tag developer up in the ribbon here. If you can't see this tag, go to File, Options, Customize ribbon, and make sure that developer here is selected. Press OK. Then you should be able to see this tag here. Here in the developer tag you choose to insert this kind of control. So you click on this one and then you just write yourself your control like this. To change the size you could right click on it Then left click to get rid of the drop down menu and just drag to the size you want, like this. Or you could right click and choose format control, go to size and adjust the size here instead. If we right click and choose format control again and choose control up here, we see that we can choose input range and a cell link. So the input range is what's gonna be seen in this control, and the cell link is a cell that gives a number depending on what you have chosen in your control. So let's just make up some values here. I have a header for myself, and then I write choice 1, choice 2, and choice 3. I right click on my control, format, and I will now choose the input range, and I will choose these 3 cells here. I press enter. And the cell link I will just put next to here. I press enter. OK. Now when I use the control and take choice 1, I get number 1 here. If I take choice 2, I get number 2, and when I take choice 3, I get number 3. And this number here can be used later on to change inputs to calculations. Then we create the controls. I go to Start Page, tag Developer, and insert this combo box. I right click on it and choose Format Control. I will now select the input range. This will be the first control, which is model type. And I select these 2 cells. I press enter. And the cell link, I will keep the cell link next to the header here. I press enter and OK. And I write here above model type, and I move it along. So here it says probabilistic and deterministic. To do the next control, I could select here again a combo box, or I could just copy this one. I select the cell next to it and press Ctrl V. And I right click, choose format control. I select a new input range. This is now start age, so these 2 cells for the input range, and the cell link will be next to here. I press OK. Make it a bit smaller. There we go. I do the procedure once again. So this was start age, and then we have the time horizon. Right click. The input range is now 3 cells, and the cell link is next to here. OK. Yep, and the last time. This should be steady perspective. The input range, these 2 cells, and the cell link right here. I press OK. So let's just make some choices. Now I took the first choice in all combo boxes, so we should have number 1 in all the cell links. That's exactly what we have here. Now if I change to a deterministic model, this number should change to number 2. And it does. So let's just change all these to number 2 and check that it's working correctly. It is. And if we choose a lifetime time horizon, we should have a number 3 on time horizon. So the controls seem to work. I will assign names to the cell links in this sheet. Often it's very practical to give cells names. For example, if I have a cost here, I can assign a name to this cell by selecting the cell and put my mouse up here and I just write in the name of the cell. I choose to call it cost, and I press enter. Now if I want to refer to this cell, instead of doing the usual way with an equal sign and then select the cell, you see the cost is coming up directly, the name of the cell. I can just write the name like this, cost, and it refers to my cell. This is practical if you're working on another sheet and you want to refer to that cell. Instead of clicking my way back, I just write cost here. Another way to name a cell is to select the cell and go to Formulas, Define Name, and I choose here cost 2. I press OK. And a third way is to write the desired name next to the cell. I write cost 3 here, then I highlight both these cells and choose Create from Selection, and I choose to get the name from the left column, so this cell will have this name. I check it equal cost 3, and it gives me this number here. So now if I'm working on some other sheet and I want to do a calculation, I want to see the difference between cost 3 and cost 2, I can just write in the names like this and press enter, and I get the result. And it can also be easier to understand what the calculation is doing, to see the names instead of just cell references. You can manage the names you've given to cells in the Name Manager in the tag Formulas. Here you see all the cells you have named, the name of the cell, the value in it, and which cell it refers to. So here you could simply delete one of the names you've given. I just press delete and press OK. I could also change this to another cell. Now I will choose to refer to F9 instead, which was former just cost, and I press close. Do you want to save the changes? Yes. So this name has now disappeared, and if I write cost 2, I get what was former just cost. I give this cell the name prob, so I put my mouse up here and just write prob, and I press enter. And here actually I won't name this cell but this cell, because we will create an equation that gives us the number 40 years or 60 years instead of 1 or 2, because we don't want the start age to be 1 or 2, we want it to be 40 or 60. This will become clearer later, but I will name this cell here instead and call it start age, and I press enter. This cell I give the name time horizon, and this one study perspective. Press enter. To make this cell give the start age, that is to give the number 40 or 60 instead of 1 or 2, we will create what is called an if statement. This is how an if statement works. Let's say we have a cell here with a number in it, and then we want another cell, this cell down here, to give us a number or a word that's dependent on what's in this cell over here. So let's say that if we have number 1 here, we want it to give us a yes. If we have number 2 or 3 or whatever, we want instead the word no. And that's easily performed with an if statement. So I start with writing an equal sign and the command if. And I start the whole formula with a start parenthesis like this. And here I get some information. It says logical test, semicolon, value if true, semicolon, value if false. That means that first I should add a logical test. In this case, the test is that this cell should equal to 1. I separated semicolon. If this logical test is true, we want the computer to give us the word yes. So here I write yes, and I write it within citation marks because it's a word and not a number. Then I use semicolon again, and here I should enter the word if this logical test is not true. In this case, no. and I end the whole thing with an end parenthesis, and I press enter. Now if I change the number in this cell, the word here should change as well automatically. I write 2 and press enter, and this cell updates to no. If I write 1, I get yes. If I write any other number, 3 or 5 or whatever, I get no. Another way to write this formula is to insert a function. Go to insert function, choose all, and scroll down to the if function. Here we go. Press OK. First, you want to enter the logical test. That is this cell. I press enter. Should equal 1. Then I use tab to come to the next cell. Value if true, yes. Tab. Value if false, no. Tab. And here I didn't need to enter the citation marks manually. They came automatically. I press OK. I change to number 1, press enter, and see that both cells update correctly. If I double click on this cell, I see the formula, and I notice that this is exactly the same formula as when I wrote it manually. The command word here depends on the language you use in your Excel. So in my case, when I use the English version, I write if. But if you're using another language, you will need to use another word for that command here. And if you're not sure what command word to use, just download the files from the website, open the files, and double click on any of these if statements, and you will see what this word is in your language, because these command words, they change automatically when you move them between programs with different language settings. In this cell I will insert an if formula that will give us the value 40 if we have chosen 40 years on the start page, and it will give us the value 60 if we have chosen 60 years on the start page. We're gonna need that number further on in the simulation model, that's why we do this. So I start with writing an equal sign and the command if. The logical test is that if this cell equals 1, it should show us 40, otherwise show us 60. End of parenthesis, and I press enter. So I go to the start page and switch to 60, and now we should have 60 in that cell. Correct. I try just once again to switch back to 40, and it gives us 40. So it seems to work. Let's make the menu with the controls look better, so when we're done it's gonna look like this. We'll have the controls lined up in a nice way. We will have title boxes to each control, and in the background a nice frame like this. I go to insert, shapes, and I choose this rectangle here. I draw it like this, and if you notice now, a new tag has appeared here, and it's only visible when I have selected my shape. So when I select a cell outside here, it disappears, but when I select my shape, it appears again. So I want to change the shape outline, that's the border of this shape. I want to have it black, and I also want to have it a bit thinner, so I go to weight and choose like that maybe, and black. The shape fill, I will choose this green. I will make it a bit smaller just by dragging like this. To add text, I right click and choose edit text, and I write model type. This was now in white, so I try to highlight it. I go to this home and choose black text, and I make it bold here, and I center it like this and make it a bit smaller like that. I delete the old title and put it up here. I check the length of this control. Maybe I can make it a bit tighter. Yeah. And I try to make the... oops, that was too tight. So this is the tightest. Then I could as well make this one a bit longer. Now it became bigger, didn't it? Yeah. I right click to change the size to 0.56, which is what I have on the other ones. Then I do the same thing for start age. I take away the old title. I use the same shape, just copy paste. I enter here, Control A, select everything and write start age. And I place it next to model type, something like that. I'll just move away this one. So how tight can this one be and still show the information? There it disappeared, like that. I see that this one is at the same height as the other one. Could make it a bit longer to fit the title. And now it became bigger again, so I right click, format control, 0.56. Something like that. Then I do the same thing with time horizon and static perspective as well. And it looks like this. I have the controls lined up and I have the title boxes. I think I'll insert a column here, just Control plus to get some more space. Last thing, I insert a new shape. Another rectangle, and I make it big like this. And I wanted to have a black border, so I choose black. Maybe I keep this weight on the border and the shape fill light gray. Maybe this one. I right click and choose send to back, so the other controls appear. And I move it a bit like this. Here we have the menu. Now we will insert the variables to the model. We're gonna do that to sheet variables over here. When we're done, it's gonna look like this. We have the names of the variables here. We have information about the variables over here. In this column here, with the title formula, we have the random sampling from distributions used for the Monte Carlo simulation. So when I press F9 here, new values are randomly sampled from each distribution. Model value is the value ultimately fed to the simulation model. In this case, it's just the same as the mean value for each variable. That's because we have chosen a deterministic model. If we change to a probabilistic model, instead of having the mean fed into the model, we're gonna have the value from the random sampling. So when I now press F9, we see that the model values are not the same all the time. They alter for each time I press F9. The variables are found in the Excel file called variables that you can download from the website. We'll just take everything here and simply copy over to our model. I press Ctrl C, choose a place here and press Ctrl V. So I double click here to be able to see everything. So first thing I can do is to remove the variable start age, because this variable is already defined over here and it depends on what we've chosen on the start page. So I remove this variable completely. I pressed Ctrl minus. Here I see that I have the currency format on these costs. I change that over here. I could also just right click on the cell and choose change format cells over here. And I want to have a number with no decimal places. Use 1000 separator, yes. Press OK. And I'll take this format and I use it on the other ones. We have it down here as well. So now it looks better. I will add a column here. I press Ctrl plus, make it a bit smaller, and this is going to be model value. And at the end here I will add the formula column. This is where we're going to have the random sampling from the distributions. Before we write the formula for the random sampling, let's get some more information about it. The probability density function is a function describing the probability for a variable to take on different values. In this example here, we see that the variable has the highest probability to take on a value around 0. The variable could take on lower and higher values as well. For example, it could take on values lower than -2, and it could take on values higher than 2, but then the probability is much lower. The cumulative density function is the area of the probability density function to a given point. So it increases all the time and finally reaches 1. The cumulative density function can be used to get the probability for a specific value. In this case, we have the value of 0.1 maybe, and we go to the cumulative density function to check out the probability of getting such a value. But what we're going to need instead is the other way around. We're going to have a random number generator which gives us a number between 0 and 1, a probability, and we want this to be transformed into a value for a variable. Therefore, we're going to use this command norminv, where inv is for inverse. So this is what the formula will look like in Excel when we're done. First we have the command norminv, then we create a random number, and we feed in the mean value and the standard error of the distribution. We will create random sampling from gamma distributions regarding costs, from normal distributions regarding treatment effects, and from beta distributions regarding utilities. I start with the first gamma distribution. I write equal sign, and the command for a gamma distribution is gamma inv, start parenthesis. The probability will be a random number between 0 and 1, and there is already a built-in function to generate that number, and the command for that function is rand. This command is language specific, so check out what is going to be in your language, and if you're not sure, download this file from the website and open your Excel and check out the formula here, then you will see it in your language. Just write it like this. I separate with semicolon. Then in the case of alpha and beta distributions, we will use alpha and beta instead of the mean and standard error to define the distribution. So here I give the alpha and I separate with semicolon, and I give the beta, and I close the parentheses and press enter. I test it by pressing F9. It seems to work. I just drag this down for the other gamma distributions, and I copy those three and paste them in down here. I just double click to check that it's actually feeding the right alpha and beta, and it is. So 3 normal distributions, norminv. To get the random number, I use this function, and here we have mean and standard deviation, it says, but it's supposed to be standard error. I just drag this down for the other 3. I double check that the right data is fed into my function. It looks alright. And finally the beta distributions, beta inverse. And here again we have alpha and beta. First a random number, then alpha, and then beta. I press F9 and they all bounce really nice. I take the format for the costs and use it on these gamma distributions, the same format down here. These I give just 2 decimal places. Same with utility, and I center it. In the column model value, we will insert an if statement, so that when we have chosen a deterministic model here, we will get the mean of all the variables, but when we have chosen a probabilistic model, we will instead get this value from the random sampling. What I will use is this cell here that we have called prob. So this cell is 1 when we have chosen probabilistic, and it is 2 when we have chosen a deterministic model. So I start the if statement with the command if, and if this cell prob is 1, then we want the probabilistic model, and then we want the model value to be from the random sampling. So it's this cell out here. But if it's not 1, then it's going to be 2, and we want the mean to be fed to the model. This cell here. And I close with the parentheses. I take this format out here. Now let's check if it works. So now we have a deterministic model. When I now press F9, this cell out here change, which means that we're having a random sampling, but the model value is fixed. It's just reporting the mean value. But when I change to a probabilistic model, the model value is changing as well when I press F9 here. We will have the same formula in all the cells, so I just drag this down. Not down to discounted, because this cell will always be this value here, 3%. I take these formats. Like that. So now we have random sampling, probabilistic model, deterministic model. The mean values are fed into the model. I will give these cells names, just as we did before on this sheet when we called this cell prob and so on. And one way to do that is just as we did before. We enter up here and just write in what we want the name to be. Cost new drug, and I press enter. Another way that's quicker when we have so many variables is just to highlight them all. Go to formulas, and here we find create from selection. And here we can choose where the names are going to come from. In this case we want the names to come from the left column, so I choose left column here and press OK. Now all these names have been assigned to these cells here, and we check that they are correct. Cost of the old drug, yes. Notice that space translates into underscore. Cost hospitalization. We go down here to length of stay, so we see that not only the space but also the parentheses translates into a underscore. That's good to know when we will refer to these cells later. To make this sheet look better, I will insert columns and rows in between and make them tighter. So I just select a column and press Ctrl+, and I make the size 1.71. I will do the same thing with the rows, and I will make the size 4.50. So here I have inserted columns in between every column with the numbers, and also tight rows in between every row with information. I give the cells containing numbers a background color, this color, and a frame. I can select several at the same time, and so on, like this. And in those cells that are empty, I enter a minus sign, press enter. I can just copy these to other cells. I create nice title boxes instead of the titles here, and I will use the same design as these, so I just copy this title box and paste it in here. I change the size, and the information here we will have variable, something like that. I copy this title box, write model value, I make sure it's in line, so it's going to be a bit down, and then this one a bit to the left, and I take it out to like 1/3 of this tight column here, and then I make this whole column as tight as possible. That was too tight because now I can't see the whole model value, the whole title. There we go. And so on. Like this, and I get rid of the old titles, just delete. And I select all my new title boxes by pressing down Control on the keyboard and put them down towards the numbers, like this. I create a frame around the variables by drawing a border on each side, and then I will insert a shape, like a roof here and like a floor down here. So I make this one a bit tighter as well. And I choose draw border here, but first I check line style. I want to have this thickness. Draw border. Nothing happened. I do it again. Here we go. I just press down with my mouse. Down here, the same here. Then I will insert a shape, and we will insert this shape here. I just draw it like this. We notice a green dot here and a yellow dot here. If you can't see these, it's because you have used the shape too tight. You see they disappear, but when you make the shape bigger, they appear. So just grab here and you can turn the shape around. And with the yellow dot, you can change the angles. I will make this black and a bit thicker, so shape outline, weight, thick like this, and black. I put it on here, and I drag it out to meet in the other end. Like this. Then I just copy it and paste it in down here, and I turn it around with the green dot and just put it in place. Here we go. We could maybe take away this row. I press Ctrl minus, and we could also take away a row down here to make it a bit tighter. I could take away these two rows, and I could make I have two columns there, so I take away one column and I make the other one tighter, so we have the variables up to the left. And last thing, I remove the grid lines. This looks pretty good. The time-dependent variables are found in the Excel file variables in the sheet time-dependent variables. And we will just copy these over directly to our model file. So I start with the table probability of dying for the people in the state healthy. Select the whole table and I press Ctrl C, and I paste it in here in the sheet tables, etc. Just choose a spot here, and I do the same thing with the other tables. I could actually select all three at the same time. I copy and paste them in. Now I will use a nice feature to make the headings always stay at the same place. So now when I scroll, they disappear. But if I use a function called freeze panes, I will keep the headings at the same place where the numbers are moving down here. I select the whole row below the headings and go to View, Freeze Panes. This one here, and I get this black thin line over the whole row. Now when I scroll, see the headings are at the same place, but the numbers move. I will assign names to these tables for future purposes. These are the basics for how to assign names and use these names for tables. Let's see, we have a table here, and I highlight it and just give it any name, numbers. Now if I use this name in another cell on the same row, it will report the number from the table I named. So if I write numbers here, it will report the number on the same row. Like this. But it doesn't work outside the table. So here I get no value. Now I give names to the time-dependent variables. I highlight the whole table. I press down Ctrl Shift and press the down arrow on the keyboard. So I select the whole table. I choose define name and write in prob die healthy. I do the same with all tables. Prob die disease. Prob disease. And finally prob hosp disease. Prob hosp disease. Here we go.